Hey friends, I shall be gone this week in Puerto Rico, assisting with ongoing hurricane recovery. Mr. Davis, Mr. Extremes, and Dr. Creepin have graciously provided their voices in my stead. I shall return to my normal narration schedule Monday, March 12th, but until then, please show some love and support to my talented guests. Thank you, friends, and I'll see you again soon.
The country of Haiti is home to many legends and myths. It's a place where you typically don't go unless you know the land and the laws by which you must abide in order to survive there. Many of those laws are written. However, some are not so easily learned. I was searching through my archives for a story to release today, and I stumbled upon some notes I took a couple of years ago during the very early days of my channel. I sat down with an 83-year-old woman from Haiti. Some of you may have heard my old stories on the life of my friend Rick, an elderly Haitian man I've known for many years. He told me the story of his life and later the life of his son being saved by a ghostly white dog. He also recounted the story of his mother being taken, transformed into a zombie, for the nefarious purposes of some obscure landowner in the back country of his native land. Every year, Rick and his wife get paid a visit from a childhood friend, whom I'll refer to as Lily. Lily lives in a simple, rural village in Haiti, but comes to Florida for a few months out of the year just to get away from it all, I guess. One day, I stopped by their house to pay her a visit, and we got to talking about some of the more bizarre things the group of old souls had either heard of or personally encountered in their decades of living in one of the hardest places in this hemisphere. As you probably know, there have long been whispers, tales of zombies roaming the lands of Haiti. If you speak to someone who knows, they will tell you where you're most likely to find them: in the fields of relatively rich men. The practice of creating zombies in reality is, in my opinion, much darker, sadder than what you would find in the movies. Lily told me the story of a young man in her town who passed away unexpectedly one day. His family mourned his loss as they laid his body to rest. 2 years later, he was found wandering the streets of his home village, appearing to be searching for something. A blank, dead look had been etched into his now dull and sun-baked face. People asked him, "What are you doing here? Where are you going? You're supposed to be a dead man." The young man groaned, "I had a cow. Where is it? Where am I?" The villagers heard through word of mouth that 2 people from other towns, dead people, were seen meandering the streets as well, seeming to have been drawn there like moths to a flame. It was later discovered that the zombies were all under the employ of a farmer. He had been using them to work his fields, but one day he died, and many of the zombies wandered off, some eventually making their way back to their family homes. It is said that when someone is turned into a zombie, they could hear the wailing and crying of their loved ones as they lie there in their casket, at their own funeral, unable to move. They cannot see or speak. They hear the thunk of every shovelful of soil thrown down into their grave as they get buried, not quite alive, but not truly dead. The longer they stay in that state of in-between, the more their memory and brain functions diminish. That erosion of the mind becomes more permanent as time goes on, if the reviving ritual is not done soon enough. The process often results in a shambling husk not unlike the classic zombie of modern fiction. That's why, ever since I learned about this, I've always considered it as being one of the saddest fates a human being could possibly undergo, being a shell of one's former self. Lily's tales got more haunting and bizarre as the evening went on. She told of a white man who owned a shipping company in a large industrial district in southern Haiti. Trucks full of limes, citronella, and other produce came in and out every day. The man also had a factory where the items were boiled down to make essential oils for shipping to France, for the production of perfume. The man's factory was located on a large plot of land which had open fields. The fields were grassy but riddled with empty patches. Upon closer inspection, you could see that the empty parts were actually covered by boards of brittle old wood. There had been reports of people walking through the fields on their way to or from work, who had actually been seen falling through the boards, and into deep holes below. Those people would vanish for good. The man's company truck was a normal sight to see trekking over the hazardous roads during the day, but at night, seeing that vehicle was a very different experience. The man would drive his truck, screaming across the dark roads with no lights on. The black mass of metal careened through the narrow dirt roads at concerning speeds, at all hours of the night. Rumors were that the man would hang out of his window when he saw someone walking along the road at night. He would swing a lasso that was supposedly made of human intestines and ensnare anyone unfortunate enough to find themselves within his reach. The unlucky soul would never be seen again. Even the man's employees, people who worked for him simply because he was the only major employer for miles, were known to occasionally disappear without a trace. The man eventually gained a reputation for being a vampire. The locals believed he was capturing people and feeding on them. Rick chimed in with another story, one which both he and Lily were familiar with. There was a man named Leona in Lily's village who was known for his great strength. Leona was also known for selling a special soup dish out of his home, which was, so he said, made with the reproductive organs of bulls. A legend grew about Leona that told of a magical item in his pot that kept people coming back to buy soup from him, even after reports circulated saying that tiny human fingers and toes had been found in the soup. People inexplicably kept on coming. One day, a father in the village whose children had gone missing went to a voodoo parish, asking the priest to divine who may have taken his children. To his surprise, the priest told him that his children were taken by Leona, the soup maker. The voodoo man knew of Leona's strength and fighting ability, so he gave the grieving father a strong warning. You won't be able to take him on your own. If you want to destroy him, I will tell you what to do. Find out where he goes to relieve himself, then take a sample of his stool. Place a smear of it on the door of his home, and bring the rest back to me. The father spent his days trailing Leona, following him deep into the woods every day until he finally had his chance. He waited until nightfall and did what the priest told him to do. The next morning, Leona saw the excrement staining his door and became irate, roaming the streets and loudly demanding to know who had vandalized his home. Being familiar with the practice of voodoo, he tried using the same material to craft a potion of his own, but as soon as he completed it, he dropped dead, not knowing that magic was formed against him. Rick had one more story to share with me. He relayed one told to him by a man named Ivan, an old friend of his. Ivan said that late one night, he was standing with a group of friends on a street corner when a young woman approached them. She was holding a large basket made of dried palm leaves woven together. She had a very kind and pleasant demeanor about her, and politely requested that the boys leave the area. Ivan, knowing better than to question something so strange, excused himself and agreed to leave right away. He kept his eye on his friends as he walked away slowly. He could hear them badgering the young woman, asking her why she wanted them to leave, as she bent down to remove several oddly shaped, dark objects from the basket and began setting them out on the ground around her. Ivan couldn't make out what the items were, but he could hear her ominous voice as she said to the boys, "If you don't want to leave, that's fine." He looked back and cringed when one of the boys kicked the woman's basket. She calmly continued her mysterious business without a single word, or even so much as an angry look. No one ever figured out what she was doing there, but every month after that, one of the boys died. One of them left the country to live in the U.S. He spent many years in Miami, Florida, but eventually came back to visit his family in Haiti. He died suddenly only a couple of days into his visit. The only one still living out of the boys that were there that night was Ivan. To this day, he credits his survival to the instinct that told him to obey the young lady's request. He had seen strange things before, and had developed a policy of just walking away when something like that would happen. Those were the last of the stories I heard from Rick and Lily, but I know they have 1,000 more. It's as if monsters and magic are as real there as death and taxes. Dear Mr. X, my name is Amanda. I wanted to let you know I've been binging on your channel. It's always good to hear from people who've witnessed unexplained events. It makes me feel less like a crazy person for having seen the thing I mentioned in the comments of one of your videos. As you requested, here's my story. I grew up in a house that was, and well, still is, haunted, I think. I moved out some years ago, but my mom still lives there. I honestly have no idea how she manages to stay there by herself. Throughout my life, there have been so many bizarre incidents there, from disembodied footsteps and voices, to objects moving around on their own, to constant bouts of sleep paralysis with their own host of horrors, even full-bodied apparitions seen by my cousin and I on 2 separate occasions. The sleep paralysis got so bad I had to start sleeping in my mom's bed and keep a nightlight on while I slept. I was simply too afraid to be in the dark alone. There is definitely something wrong with that house. The thing we briefly spoke about in the comments, though, the thing you asked me to write you about, I really don't know if I could call it an apparition. It was nothing like the quote-unquote ghosts I've seen and heard in the past. In fact, it's like nothing I've ever heard of before. That's actually the main reason I've been listening to so many of these paranormal stories. I'm searching for some kind of answer. No luck so far. I believe I was about 16 or 17 years old when I saw this thing. I was in my room with my dog, and we were both sitting on my bed. I was reading a school book, so I had my desk lamp on and plenty of light in the room for me to feel at ease. I had the TV on for some background noise. I remember hearing Jay Leno doing his monologue for The Tonight Show, and that they were featuring a band I wanted to hear. I'm telling you this to let you know why I've ruled out the possibility of sleep paralysis in this case. The room was pretty well lit, and I was wide awake. The desk with the lamp was situated right below a window in my room. I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but that window actually used to be a door before my dad remodeled the house. There also used to be concrete steps leading up to that door, which my dad also removed. Years ago, the house was basically divided into 3 separate apartment-style dwellings, with my room as the living room in one of them. The setup was all very strange. I guess they had to make do with the little space they had. As I was reading, my dog slowly stood up on the bed and began growling toward the window. I could see the hairs on the back of her neck standing straight up. I figured she was probably hearing the neighbors outside or something, so I just told her to calm down. I leaned forward to get up, maybe take a peek outside through the blinds to see if anyone was cutting through our yard or something like that. As soon as I made it to my feet, a thick, heavy feeling of dread seemed to drape over my whole body like a blanket. All I could think about was that I no longer wanted to be in that room. At the same time, I was too terrified to even move a single inch. I was still facing the window when I started seeing something appear on the wall. It was like some kind of gelatinous material. As the spots on the wall began to multiply, I could see that whatever it was, it appeared to be one mass, oozing, or maybe even phasing directly through the wall of my house, right through my lamp and table. Within a few seconds, there was a refrigerator-sized blob of amorphous, jelly-like translucent material standing in the middle of my room. No distinguishable features to it. It was mostly clear and transparent. The surface of it seemed to pulsate or vibrate inwardly, if you can imagine that. As it did, I could see the light rippling inside of its, for lack of a better term, body. The weird thing is that it appeared to be solid, 3-dimensional. It wasn't an ethereal or projected image. I feel like if I threw something at it, whatever I threw would sink right in and get stuck inside. I stared at this thing for about 30 seconds before my brain snapped back into action and told my legs to get me the hell out of that room. I ran out screaming. My dog was scared so badly that she urinated on the floor and refused to go back into the room. I was just as bad, maybe worse. I didn't want to be in that house at all. My mom had to go in later and pack a bag for me since I was afraid to go back into my own room. And they sent me to spend a week at my grandmother's house. It was an extremely frightening experience. Years later, after I moved out, my cousin stayed in my room for a couple months following his divorce. He needed time to find a new place, so my mom offered. Before long, he started sleeping with the lights on. I asked him why, and he explained that one night he woke up and saw a large man wearing dark clothes standing at the end of his bed, staring at him. He thought it was a burglar and was freaked out already, but the man turned and walked right through the closed bedroom door. Needless to say, he expedited his house hunting and moved out soon after that. A lot of unsettling things happened in that house, but that blob thing was definitely the worst, for me. I often think about how thankful I am not to be living there anymore. I know you hear a lot of stories from different people, so tell me, have you heard anything like this? I hope I never see it again. Haven't yet. But I'm still quite curious. Thanks again. Amanda. Hey there, Mr. X. I'm Joel. I wanted to tell you a story about something odd that happened to me a couple of years ago. So I have a friend who owns a summer house in the Stockholm archipelago, Sweden. It's a smaller, less popular island, so there are only around 10 people with houses there. The house my friend owns is basically a big living room with 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom barely large enough for a shower cabin. The area surrounding the house is pretty well forested. Not very dense, but it's enough to block out most of the ambient light, rendering the area pitch black at night. So, my friend invited me and the guys to come out during Walpurgis night, a holiday that's sort of like a Swedish Halloween. Basically, we were going to get drunk, barbecue, and hang out by a bonfire. The celebration came and we had a good time. The food was great, and we ended up with way more alcohol than we needed. The only problem was that the bonfire got a little bit out of hand, so we sorta had to fight it back with a garden hose to avoid the grass going up in flames. Anyway, I was pretty well intoxicated by the time I decided to head for bed. I was able to pick where I wanted to sleep, since I was the first one to turn in. Naturally, I claimed one of the bedrooms. It was very basic, sparsely furnished as many summer homes tend to be. A full-size bed, nightstand, a small dresser, and a desk with a chair. There was a window that looked out into the forest, which was covered by a pull-down shade, as the morning sun shines very bright in Sweden from that direction. I pulled the shade down and laid in bed. I have this habit of listening to YouTube stories as I drift off to sleep. I hardly ever start with horror, but I almost always end up there. As I laid there in bed, one of the stories came to an end, fading into silence, leaving only the sound of rain against the bedroom window. I always love it when I could hear the rain as I fall asleep. That soothing sound makes the transition so much more wonderful, magical even, especially when you're already buzzed. Needless to say, it didn't take long before I was rolled over and out like a light. I woke up early that morning. I believe it was around 5 a.m. I crawled out of bed to search for both a toilet and something to drink, whichever came first. I knew the best I could probably hope for was some leftover flat Coke or Fanta from the night before. As I wandered through the living room, I looked out the window and could see the glow of the sun beginning to arch across the sky. The yard outside was blanketed in mist, a common sight in the archipelago. Something about the scene made me smile. I could feel it in the air that it was going to be a fine morning. I went to the bathroom and relieved myself before grabbing a glass and filling it with whatever non-alcoholic fluid I could find. As I got back to my room, placing the glass down on the table, I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I realized something about the environment was wrong. When I looked out the window a moment ago, the sky was clear, but I noticed I could still somehow hear the rain on the bedroom window. My mind searched for ways to write it off and dismiss it. I figured it was some kind of prank by the other guys in the house, or that someone left a garden hose on outside. A bit of a stretch, I know, but I needed an explanation. I stared at the window for a moment, still obscured by the drawn shade, before going back out into the living room. I did a quick head count of my friends as they lay strewn about the place, each one of them sleeping more heavily than the last. I opened a window in the living room and leaned my head out to get a look at the outside of my bedroom window. What I saw, it made me sick to my stomach. There was a cloud of what seemed to be extremely condensed mist hovering near my window. It was gray and swirled about in a somewhat unnatural way. As I looked closer, almost in shock, I could see things moving inside the mist, like something oscillating. I realized that whatever it was making the sound of what I thought was rain on my window. Still being a bit drunk, I decided that the best idea would be to go back inside my room, slide my phone up under the shade, and take a video of whatever was happening. I quietly closed the living room window and made my way back to my room. When I got there, I unlocked my phone and snuck over to the closed shade as stealthily as I could. I opened the camera app on my phone and hit record, before sliding the camera up under the blinds. After about 2 minutes, I pulled the phone back to have a look. The sound of rain still hadn't stopped. I looked at the recording, and my heart began to thump like it was trying to escape my chest. I could see the gray mist outside, but I could also make out several outlines of hands tapping their fingertips against the window, imitating the sound of rain. Again, I have to stress that I was still drunk. That said, unwilling to confront whatever was outside my window, I decided that the best course of action would be to just pull my mattress out of the room and plop it down on the living room floor where my friends were still passed out. Somehow, I was able to fall right back to sleep beside them, despite what I had just witnessed. Later that day, when I finally woke up and everyone was rubbing the sleep out of their eyes, I went back to the room to see if the sound of rain would still be there. I heard nothing. I peered through the shades and saw a perfectly ordinary view of the outside landscape. Nothing whatsoever out of the ordinary. I'm ashamed to admit that I decided not to tell anyone and just deleted the video off my phone, because I didn't want to think about it. After all, we had another night to spend there. Seriously though, do you have any idea what I may have seen? Was I just sleepwalking, or was this all in the mind of a drunk man? Maybe a combination of both. Anyway, thanks for listening, Mr. X. Sincerely, Joel.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community. Be sure to check out my Choose Your Own Path horror game on the iOS and Android App Store, and grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.